So my name is Carlos Naranjo. I'm a community organizer in South Florida, in the county of Broward, with New Florida majority, and I'm an immigrant from Colombia.
So tell me about the governor of Florida, and maybe just like, what are a couple of things that folks who don't live in Florida need to know about your governor?
Well, yes, we have a governor called Governor Ron DeSantis. We like to call him Ron Desastre because we believe that he has been modeled himself after Trump in rhetoric and action. He's infamous by having political campaigns where he's teaching his baby in the videos how to build a wall, and it's supposed to be the wall that the president is trying to build in the border with Mexico. So that's where he started his political campaign, demagoguing about building walls in the state of Florida. And then he follows similar policies in action. So, for example, right now with the coronavirus, just like Trump, he's burying his head in the sand, refusing to acknowledge the severity of the pandemic. Florida, under his watch, has been one of the states that has refused to have a statewide mandated shutdown, basically. He refused to do that, even as the numbers were spiking. And even now, when we see the resurgence of cases, he's refusing to do it. We also know that Florida happens to correlate with the spikes with states that refuse to, encourage to open early. So Florida, like Texas, Georgia, and many other southern states were pushed to open soon. And guess what? Now, because of his leadership and rushing to reopen the state, Florida is one of the possible epicenters of the coronavirus in the state. And so, yes, it's been just a really botched, or we would say almost criminal administration. People are losing their lives. In Florida, 3,600 people have lost their lives. That is 3,600 families that could have been, alive today by proper action, by early action, by not rushing to open the state. We also have something like 170,000 people infected. We are breaking records. The other day we had 5,000 infected cases in a day. The next day, or the next few days, we have 9,000 cases, and it's going up until almost 10,000 a day. And so we just see an administration that is more than the Trump administration in rhetoric and in action, and it's just costing many people's lives, and we think it's an outrage.
Tell us a little more about, I know that you guys are a multiracial organization, and I know that a lot of your work talks about the impact, right, of the policies that the governor has had on communities of color in particular. Can you tell me more about, well, who are the Latinos in Florida, and how are some of the policies impacting Latinos and communities of color?
Yes, so what we know is that in moments of crisis like this corona pandemic, what it does is that it reveals the true inequality. It shows the disparities, the social disparities, the racial disparities, the economic disparities, and of course in a state like Florida where so many migrants like us are here, it also shows the deep disparities with the migrant communities. Nationally and also statewide, we see that many communities that are migrant, they have very little access because it's hard to be educated on these things. And not only that, but many people that also happen to be undocumented, they have no relief at all because, of course, some of the federal efforts exclude intentionally undocumented communities. And so we see that Florida is being hit super hard because, of course, being a migrant state, there's many people that have basically no access to any of this. We also are a state that has, that has a lot of black communities, right? And so that's also a community that's being hit basically the worst. This is also reflected in studies. There's been national studies that show that basically communities of color and black communities are affected the worst because of the disparities, right? So these are the communities that have less access to education, they have less access to the knowledge and having a way to access the services. And also, these are the communities that get less information. And many of the systems that we have to provide services are inaccessible to many because simply some people don't have the means to have access to that information. And besides that, for example, in South Florida or in Central Florida, there are big chunks of the state where we have a vast agricultural sector. Most of that agricultural sector is basically migrant labor. And what we've seen, for example, is that the Governor DeSantis, Governor DeSastres, he was actually blaming the spikes in Florida of coronavirus because of these migrants that mobilize themselves in buses to call him packed like sardines. And so all of this rhetoric that is very xenophobic, trying to blame communities that are actually the most vulnerable into saying these are the communities that are causing the spike. Rather, these are communities that are very vulnerable. These are communities that don't have the luxury of stay at home because if they stay at home, they're not able to work. If they're not able to work, they cannot pay rent. And so they actually become these so-called essential workers that have to go in the front lines and basically cultivate the food that we eat. And these are the very communities that the governor DeSantis was blaming because of the spikes. And as a response, there's been a big call for something very simple, an executive order by Governor DeSantis to expand Medicaid. Basically, that never happened because they were opposing Obamacare. And so that was presented as a good opportunity to basically provide services for people. And something to mention about the work that we have been doing is that, of course, we have to remain at home, and we have many canvases in the streets, going to laundromats, going to parks, going to schools, registering voters, but because we're not able to do that, it says, we were not going to be fighting anybody, so New Florida Majority switched into a phone reach out system where all of those canvases that were registering voters are also making calls to basically, one, checking on people, checking on all of our communities, the black and brown community that we so love and we work for. And so we've been able to have a very successful shift. This pivot created something like 300,000 calls that were made to Floridians. Out of those 300,000 calls, more than 20,000 conversations occurred, and so we were able to get a true sense of the disparity and the horror that our communities are facing. And some of the things that we found was that more than half of those people that we contacted have elders or have children in their households, meaning people that are very vulnerable to this disease. And so through some of these efforts, we were able to get the information and also, of course, connect people to information. And a way that we did that was that amongst very different partners, we also created a website called coronaaction.org, where many partners come in and provide information, basically ways to have access to local testing, basically ways to have access to food distributions, and also not only that, but also there's a segment where we talk about the campaigns that we're doing, because there's many things that you can also do online. And so we also had petitions talking about pushing for a moratorium of the evictions. And that was actually something that was achieved. There was a big victory by this big coalition along with New Florida Majority. There was an eviction moratorium that has been extended. Right now, the latest extension is until August 1st, and we're hoping that it gets extended. But not only that, we're building on that efforts and those victories to basically call for a cancellation of rent, because this is really what must happen. People haven't been able to work for weeks and months. They are super behind on rent and mortgages, and so what we're calling is that as an economic stimulus, basically you should cancel that rent so that those people, instead of being underwater and basically facing homelessness after this pandemic culminates, we want to have an effort to cancel the rent so that these people can, basically move forward and continue to work and basically not be facing the serious consequences of the action. And so we also have many efforts to tackle unemployment. The unemployment rate in the United States is 11.1%, horrific. In Florida, it's actually higher. It's something like 14.7%, much higher than the national average. And so we're also pushing for unemployment to be extended. And we're doing that because, as many states in the country, but especially Florida, we have the infamous fact that we have the worst unemployment in the entire country. We have the lowest unemployment, which is about $275 a week, which is an outrageous. Nobody can live with those with that type of services. Not only is it very low, but we also have the lowest length, so it's only 12 weeks. Also the lowest in the entire nation. And so because we have those realities, those have been able to shape the things that we do, to push for basically further unemployment, further weeks, and more into the amount of what we do. And so those are very many things that we've done. We have also, of course, focused on the communities that are more marginal, so African American communities, immigrant communities, but also the communities that are also behind bars. So, for example, we know that county jails, we know that immigration detention centers are an epicenter of migrant horror. They're basically a COVID-19 time bomb. And so there's been a lot of efforts also to be involved in pushing, for example, the county jails to decarcerate, meaning people that are elderly, people that are immunodeficient, people that maybe are there only because they cannot pay bail, that some of those cases get reviewed and that they get released at this moment of crisis in detention centers for migrants, in jails and county jails, because that's what the best public health policy you can have. And also we're doing this because we feel that it is an outrage what's happening nationally. People probably know that the Department of Homeland Security just announced that the inspectors that go and check migrant detention centers, that they're calling on these inspectors to stop the inspections of these places, the migrant detention centers. Why? Because it's very dangerous for the inspectors, because they could catch COVID. Well, what about the people that are detained in these places, right? So these people are obviously in more danger, right? They're in very confined spaces. There's cases that we heard of hunger strikes happening as a demand to receive proper services. Meanwhile, we have the Department of Homeland Security saying that these inspectors are not going to be inspecting because it's dangerous. Again, what about the people inside? And so in Florida, with New Florida Majority, we've been involved in some of those, we call it decarceration, lowering the people that are in cages because it's very dangerous. And so, yeah, it's been very successful. I work, for example, in Broward County, around the city of Fort Lauderdale, and the county jail there, because of these efforts, is at the lowest carceration rate ever in Broward County, and that's because of these efforts that we have helped to push. And so, yeah, so these are some of the many efforts that we began to tackle to address the issues of unemployment, address the issues of addictions that could possibly happen, the issues of migrant detentions, of people that are in jail, and basically just making the community aware of all of the opportunities that exist, because this is also something that we believe that even in crisis, in many ways, there's the emergence of opportunities, and there is an emergence of hope in resistance. And so we've been able to do many of these efforts to really tackle the most vulnerable communities. And now, given that we're close to election time, we're also ramping up efforts to basically encourage everybody to come out and vote.
Yeah, thank you for all of that. And so your governor is coming up for re-election in November at the same time as Trump, is that right?
No. He's going to be re-elected in 2022. But,
2022, okay.
Yeah, but what we're gonna have right now is that we're gonna have state attorney races after election. So the state attorneys are the ones that, for example, help us fight the crisis of lack of police accountability. These are the top officials in the county, and so in Broward and in Miami-Dade, there are races for the state attorney, and we're getting involved in those races. We are also getting involved in them because we're pushing the platform that the state attorney shouldn't be cooperating with ICE. And so there's a big opportunity to push those platforms for the state attorneys. so that communities and basically law enforcement is not cooperating with the police. People should know that in the county of Miami, Miami-Dade, we have a Latino mayor, Carlos Jimenez. He was one of the first big metro city mayors in the entire country that capitulated to Trump pushing for cooperation between the police and ICE. And so that's what something that's happening in Miami-Dade, in the county. There is a big fight to get new leadership to the mayor. There's a figure called Levin Cava, who's running for be the mayor of Miami-Dade, and it's because we want to keep these positions accountable. And so some of the platforms that we're talking about is that no cooperation with ICE, much of a better response to coronavirus, having some of these efforts of canceling the rent. Many of these things, we're also pushing them at the local level because, of course, in Florida, we have the trifecta with the governor and the two senators being Republicans. And so what we're doing is that to wage a full spectrum battle for our communities, we're also seeing that if we begin to take over local offices at the county, we can begin to get these efforts going. And if we get a few big counties going, like in Miami-Dade or Broward, then we can begin to roll out this in the entire state and hopefully from the bottom up, pushing for some of this proper legislation. We also know that this legislation benefits everybody, right? So I'm sure there's Republicans that are going to lose their homes because they cannot pay their rent and they're out of a job. There's Republicans that are facing the horrors of coronavirus. And so some of these efforts are basically to push this common sense legislation that it has a very moral core, but at the end of the day also affects benefits very positively everybody. So we're seeing that there is a lot of traction because some of these efforts have a lot of appeal, a wide-ranging appeal. And of course, for us, a New Florida Majority and the progressive coalitions of organizations in Florida, our focus is communities of color, black and brown, undocumented, the trans community, like this is the community that we fight for. But also we in big coalitions, we're pushing for some of these factors so that there's big coalitions that are coming out. We like to call it in this election space, we call it expanding the electorate, meaning having platforms that energize the community, because it is very important that some of these local elections also get some participation. We're pushing to get Trump out of office, definitely, and that's our main priority, to get him completely out. We need to have Trump afuera. Ese es un sinvergüenza que no puede estar en la presidencia. But we are also saying that some of these energies have also need target at the local level, because those are where there's a lot of opportunities as well. And so from the ground up at county levels, county mayors, commissioners of some municipalities, the statewide election for president, all of these things are being tackled cohesively so that we can get a true victory for the people in November.
That makes sense, and maybe we should have started there instead of your governor. But I think really the connection that I wanted to make was that basically it all connects, as you were saying, that there's policies that are being pushed by the Trump administration that people locally are moving. I mean, and even if they were there before Trump, but there's a way in which they connect with each other. But anyway, yeah, thank you for all of that information. Any last things that you'd like to leave us with?
No, I think when we talk about things like abolishing ICE or defunding ICE, I think that connection is very clear with the efforts of defunding the police and what that means. It means that we take these bloated budgets. If you look at any budget in municipalities or counties, police almost get half or more, sometimes even more. We're trying to also connect those efforts, so because we're trying to talk about a fusion politics where people are coming together, talking about something that we like to call the budgets. For us, budgets are types of moral documents. They talk about what you want to give love to, and when you look at budgets and commissions, mental health, parks, education, our teachers, they're always been neglected, and so there's also a big educational effort to talk about the budgets and the priorities that some of these politicians have as a way to energize our communities to come out and vote. First and foremost, to kick Trump out of office, but importantly, to get some of these local elected officials out of office and put some of our own people that are supporting our platforms and our communities. And this is a way that we're saying that from the bottom up we can gain power, and again we can push Florida, one of the largest swing states, have it vote the right way so that Trump doesn't get into office and he doesn't get reelected.